Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Dear Dhamma friends, we were discussing Noble Eightfold Path, and we have actually completed the path factors. Basically the 8 path factors we already have discussed. So as you can remember, I was referring Janusoni Brahmana Sutta, as you can see in the screen. And there Buddha refers Noble Eightfold Path as a kind of a divine vehicle, as a Dhamma vehicle, and an unsurpassed vehicle which is used in the battlefield with the defilements. So after that he gave an account of some explanation about the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Noble Eightfold Path is basically divided into 3 trainings: the Sila Sikha, the morality training, and then Samadhi Sikha, the concentration training, and Panya Sikha, that is the wisdom training. So these 3 trainings are interrelated, they are actually helping each other. And typical approach is one has to develop fair amount of morality, and that actually helps to develop concentration. And once the concentration is developed to the level of necessary amount of vipassana, then one would be able to develop vipassana. But that doesn't mean that we always have to start in a linear manner. We can start anywhere, but ultimately, not really ultimately, but as we are growing from somewhere, the other 2 trainings also have to be joined. Other 2 trainings also has to be amalgamated. So all these 3 trainings are interrelated, and you can't deal with without any of these. So all 3 are necessary, and all 3 are helping each other. And today actually I thought of discussing a little bit further. As you can see from the Mahachattarīsika Sutta diagram, so there are 2 more factors mentioned there, and those are called Samma Panya and Samma Vimutti. So the Samma Panya or Samma Jnana and Samma Vimutti are not often discussed, but in several suttas Buddha explained that the Samma Jnana and Samma Vimutti are 2 other path factors. Actually they are developed as a result of Noble Eightfold Path. So if one develops Noble Eightfold Path, so that actually leads to develop Samma Jnana and Samma Vimutti. Basically means Samma Jnana means the correct wisdom, and Samma Vimutti means the correct release. So this correct release, correct freedom, and correct knowledge are sort of outcomes of the Noble Eightfold Path. And therefore it is mentioned that the Arahants are basically having these 10 factors, while the others basically have 8 factors. So it is mentioned Samma Itiko Bhikkave Atthanga Samannagato Seko Rasanga Samannagato Araha. The Seka, a trainee, is with 8 path factors, and Aseka, that is Arahant, the fully enlightened being, is with 10 path factors. So therefore I thought of a little explain about these other 2 path factors as well. Actually, in order to discuss these other 2 path factors, I am referring a couple of suttas to refer some explanation about these path factors, and we come across a beautiful explanation about the proper freedom or complete freedom, Samma Vimutti or Suvimutta Chitta, in the Aryavasa Sutta. Aryavasa Sutta is available in the Anguttara Nikaya Dasaka Nipata, that is the numerical discourses of the Buddha, and they are the section of the 10 factors. So there Buddha mentioned Katancha Bhikkave Bhikkhu Suvimutta Chitto Hoti. So what is it, monks, called Suvimutta Chitta, the fully liberated mind. full free mind. Ida bhikkhave bhikkhuno raga chittang vimuttang hoti. So in that particular monk's mind, the lust is free. Dosa chittang vimuttang hoti. The mind has free from the hatred. Moha chittang vimuttang hoti. His mind is free from delusion. Evanko bhikkhave bhikkhu suvimutta chitto hoti. And such monk is called having a properly freed mind. And then similarly Buddha asks, Katancha bhikkhave bhikkhu suvimutta panyo hoti. So what is it called suvimutta panyo? Proper freedom from wisdom. Ida bhikkhave bhikkhu rago me pahino uchinna mulo tala vattu kato anabhava kato ayatin anuppada dhammoti pajanati. Now he give a little further explanation there. He mentioned that the lust is completely uprooted and it is made not available in the future. It's completely uprooted and it is no possibility of arising again. Even the potential to arise has completely uprooted. So therefore it is mentioned it's like a cut off palmyra tree where it can't sort of grow again. So completely uprooted. So similarly he mentioned about the hatred and delusion. So basically this means the complete uprooting of raga dosa moha, lust, hatred and delusion, and that is the full enlightenment, and that is called suvimutta panyo, the proper liberation through the wisdom. So you can see in the first one actually you can recognize kind of a gradual removal of these three fetters, and later one reaches the complete uprooting of these three fetters. And therefore we need to discuss a little bit about how one can have some temporary liberation, and that is called samma vimutti, and even sometimes called as cheto vimutti, sort of freedom of mind. So there are different categories of freedom of mind explained in various suttas, and actually that is not limited to vipassana, and one can even have freedom of mind through samatha practice. Say for example, you have heard about metta, the loving kindness meditation. So if one develops loving kindness meditation in a systematic manner, so one can reach metta cheto vimutti, freedom of mind through metta, loving kindness. So just to explain a little bit about that, so it is easy then to understand the other type of freedom of mind. So assume that you are developing loving kindness meditation and you sit in a comfortable position and you are keeping your eyes closed and your body straight, and now you are trying to develop loving kindness towards yourself, and now you are sort of wishing you well. May I be happy, may I be well, may I be free from suffering, may I be free from hatred. So likewise you are developing some happiness towards yourself and success towards yourself, and you are basically developing some positive atmosphere in your mind, and that is fairly a blissful state. And once you are conversant with that, you can now extend that to another person, someone you are respecting, and then you can develop the same amount of loving kindness to that person. And similarly you can spread to other people as well, and even you can spread metta to other, say some neutral people whom you are not very much attached, or you don't have any kind of aversion. And similarly, once you are fairly developed, you can even spread metta towards the people that you don't like, even to your enemies if there are, and you can develop loving kindness. So that indicates that you are now breaking the barriers. And then we are coming to an area where you are able to spread metta towards the all beings available in the front direction. Say for example, you take all the beings, maybe humans, maybe animals, maybe the heavenly realms, whoever it is, and now we are spreading metta to all the beings available in the front. Now it's a kind of emanating metta, spreading metta. and then all the beings available onto your right hand side, you are spreading metta. All the beings available in your behind side, so you are spreading metta. All the beings available in your left hand side, you are spreading metta. All the beings available in the upper side, upside, you are spreading metta. Again, similarly, the downside, you are spreading metta. Now you are very much like a metta source, loving kindness source. Like say when you light a bulb, so it can spread light, it can illuminate everywhere, so, like the sun, so it illuminates everywhere. Similarly, your mind also now very much like a source of loving kindness, and you are unlimitedly spreading metta. So your state of mind is now unlimited. It is not limited to a particular group of people or particular group of direction. Rather, to every direction now you can spread metta. So this level is called metta ceto vimutti, and Buddha has really appreciated such loving kindness, and he basically lists 11 benefits if one can develop such kind of loving kindness, because the mind has no limitation. Mind has become completely unlimited, immeasurable, and this is a very good state of mind, and Buddha has actually praised it, and that even can be used as a kind of a base for vipassana practice. So similarly, you can remember there are 4 Brahma Viharas, so metta is one of them. Then karuna, compassion is available. Mudita, altruistic joy is available. Upekka, equanimity is also available. So these 4 Brahma Viharas, divine abodes, can be developed in one's mind, and they are called appamana ceto vimutti. So where the mind's barriers are completely broken, and now the mind become immeasurable. There are no limits in the mind. So mind has become immeasurable. So therefore it is called appamana ceto vimutti. All those 4 Brahma Viharas can be developed to that level. And then there's another type of freedom of mind available, that's called akinchanya ceto vimutti. So it is actually available in the arupa jhana level. If one develops properly the rupa jhana, the material jhana, and then one is able to associate casino or whatever other method, and then able to develop arupa jhana. So there one can come to an akinchanyayatana, where the mind is completely not taking any object, and you condition the mind to have nothing, and then basically that nothingness taking as a perception, mind is now absorbed to akinchanyayatana, or what we call as nothingness. So that is also another kind of liberation, temporary liberation, and that is we can say the mind is free temporarily by having the perception of nothingness. Then now these 2 categories, appamana ceto vimutti and akinchanya ceto vimutti, that is the freedom of mind achieved through the immeasurables, and the freedom of mind achieved through nothingness comes under the category of samatha practice. And then we come across another 2 categories called Sunyata ceto vimutti and animitto ceto vimutti. So those are basically the vipassana categories. So if one is developing vipassana, so he may come across that there is no person within himself, there is no being, there is no satta, and similarly there is no person or being in the outside as well. There is no soul inside and there is no soul outside. So if one is having that understanding, so he can use that to liberate the mind. He reflect to himself and understand, okay, there is no person here, there is no being here, there is no soul here, and that is basically the teaching of the anatta. And then as he continue to recognize that, so his mind does not sort of attach to any particular place, any particular part of the body, because there is no essence inside. So similarly, he can spread that same knowledge to the outside. So there is no place to establish the mind. So that also helps to liberate the mind. So it is called Sunyata Cheto Vimutti. So Buddha mentioned iti patisanchikkati sunyamidang attenava attani yenava. So there is nothing belongs to me, and there is no anything called me. Something belong to a person, to an individual. So using this kind of a perception, one can develop Sunyata Cheto Vimutti, or the emptiness, the freedom of mind achieved through emptiness. And then there's the other category called Animitta Cheto Vimutti, where one is liberating the mind by the practice of impermanence. Say, for example, one is practicing, say, Vedananupassana as an example, and one is able to keep one's attention on different types of feelings, maybe pleasurable feelings, equanimous feelings, painful feelings. So now again and again he is applying his mind and observing. And once he is continuing this kind of practice, so he may understand all these different types of feelings are quite transient. They come and go, they arise and pass away, and they are quite rapid. So even though at the beginning you feel like these pleasurable feelings remain for a long time, but once you see closely, examine very closely, you will understand it is not a single feeling, but there are a group of small feelings. Minute feelings are there. So each minute feeling is so transient, very quickly arise and pass away. So this phenomena is common to painful feelings and also common to equanimous feelings. Now you have a kind of common understanding that all the feelings are consisting of these kind of very small feelings, and none of them are permanent. They are extremely transient, and you are keeping your attention on different types of feelings, and ultimately you come across an area where you can't distinguish all different types of feelings now very much like something similar, because everyone show the same behavior. And as a result of that, you feel kind of a faded view, because everything appear like a flux and extremely transient, and you can't even recognize the tone of them. And mind become dispassionate, and ultimately mind become freed, and one can say the mind is freed through this not taking sign, because the rapidity of the process is so speed and so high, and as a result of that, mind is incapable of taking any sign. Since mind can't take any sign, so mind becomes signless. So this is called signless samadhi or animitta samadhi, and one has to develop it further and further. Now this is something interesting and something that we better spend some time, because through any satipatthana practice, you can actually achieve this kind of a liberation. Even through kaya anupassana, you can come to the same understanding. You can through vedana anupassana, similarly you can develop this signless meditation. And through chitta anupassana, you can develop signless meditation. And through dhamma anupassana also, you can develop this kind of signless concentration. Now, if one is able to achieve that kind of signless state for a couple of minutes, so you have to expand it, you have to enhance it, you have to develop it for, say, 5 minutes. Then you further have to develop it to 10 minutes. You further have to develop it to 15 minutes. So likewise, you are now prolonging that skill, and as a result of that, now you are capable of maintaining such for 30 minutes. So your mind is not grasping anything and not taking any sign, and the mind is fairly clean, pure, not established at any place, and your mind is now have no limitation, because there is no place to be limited. So likewise, there is no sign, and the mind is also free. So this freedom, what we call as animitta samadhi, has to be further enhanced. Now I have explained how one develop metta ceto vimutti, the freedom of mind through loving kindness. Similarly, the freedom of mind through signless feature also has to be further expanded. Now you you can't take sign in the front direction. You can't take any sign in the right hand direction. You can't take any sign in the behind direction. You can't take any sign in the left hand direction, in the upside or downside. So likewise, now your mind not taking sign in any direction. As a result of that, your mind is completely free. And this is called Animitta Cheto Vimutti, where the mind has become completely free by not taking any sign. So why such is important? So this is also something that we need to understand. Now it is true that we are able to achieve this. So why is it so important? To explain that, I refer another short sutta. There is one sutta available in Sanimitta Vagga, that is in Anguttara Nikaya. There Buddha mentioned very interesting statement. Sanimitta bhikkhave uppajjanti papaka akusala dhamma no animitta. So Buddha mentioned, monks, all these unwholesome states of the mind are arising with a sign. So this is a very important statement, that all the unwholesome states of the mind requires a sign to arise. In other terms, if there is no sign at all, then that means the mind is not at all unwholesome. Tasseva nimittassa pahana evante papaka kusala dhamma na honti. So Buddha further explained, so if one is able to slowly erase those signs available in the mind, so then there is no opportunity for any unwholesome state to arise. So in other terms, if you are maintaining a state of signlessness in your mind, then you can say the mind is completely wholesome, completely pure. There is no any mark of unwholesome state. So therefore you can say, if one is able to develop the signless concentration, one is slowly erasing all the unwholesome states in the mind. So your mind become more and more clean, clear, pure, and more sublime. Now that is why it is important to develop such state. So therefore, development of the signless meditation is highly praised, highly appreciated. And there are certain instances, say for example in the Mahavedalla Sutta, Venerable Mahasariputta explains that how one to maintain such signless concentration. So he mentioned that there are 3 factors are needed to maintain such signless concentration. Tayoko auso paccaya animittaya ceto vimuttya titiya. Sabba nimittanancha amanasikaro, animittaya cha dhatuya manasikaro, pubbecha abhisankharo. So these are the 3 requirements or prerequisites that one has to maintain this signless meditation, signless concentration. So basically it says, so you are not paying attention to any sign, and you are paying attention to the signlessness, and you have a sort of intention at the beginning that I am going to attain this signless concentration. So you are motivated through that intention, and then you stop taking any sign and you pay attention to the signlessness. So this is an interesting part. And once you are able to maintain that kind of a signless state of mind, so mind become slowly not attached with any sign, and various kinds of perceptions, various kinds of marks, signs all start to slowly fade away. So we don't need to think this as kind of dementia or Alzheimer. Rather, this is a kind of gradual improvement of the mind, enhancement of the mind. This doesn't mean that you completely forget everything. So you can recall anything when it is necessary. In order to recall, that clarity of mind is available with you and you are having very sharp mindfulness. But your mind is not crowded. Typically our minds are crowded with various incidents happened in the past. So various signs, marks, memories related to the past incidents again and again come to the surface of the mind and crowd it. Similarly, what you are going to do in the future, so your imaginations, those thoughts, images are also coming to the mind and project it, and then your mind becomes fairly crowded. So our minds are fairly crowded in that sense. But with Vipassana practice, you are able to erase those unnecessary crowding phenomena, and you are able to maintain a fairly free mind, fairly equanimous mind, and fairly clean, pure mind. So these perceptions, signs are no more bothering you. So Buddha mentioned, if there are no such signs available in the mind, you are not going to mental proliferation. Because mental proliferation also has the root cause as sign. And therefore, if one is developing animitta ceto vimutti, that means the signless concentration or the signless freedom of mind, and then such mind may not encourage mental proliferation. So your mind is fairly calm, quiet. So inner chatter is completely stopped, subsided. So you are experiencing a very blissful silence. So the silence is the outcome, in other terms. Because mental proliferation is the inner chatter, which is so noisy internally. But once you are uprooting various signs and you are not giving any importance, any value to these signs, then mind becomes more and more quiet, more and more silent, internally quiet, internally satisfied, contented. So these are some aspects that we can think that when we are talking about this signless concentration. So it also has to be further developed in order to recognize various defilements. Now, that part is where mentioned in the Samma Jnana, where you need to uproot the causes of agitation. So why your mind become agitated? Why your mind become corrupted? Why your mind can't maintain impurity? Why the mind become limited, narrow? Or why the mind become fairly attached to so much of proliferation? Now all these things have the answer as it has some defilements. So those are the lust, hatred and delusion. Now that is the cause. Now you have to get on to a area that I have to remove this delusion. I have to remove this hatred. I have to remove this lust. So they are the culprits. So unless you are uprooting these lust, hatred and delusion, you can't have complete freedom of mind. You may of course have the temporary freedom of mind, but not ultimate. So therefore, in one's practice, one has to come to this determination. Okay, I now have achieved some temporary liberation. Mind is enjoying that. Mind is able to appreciate it. Why can't I have it forever? So what are the causes for breaking this kind of a freedom? Why am I losing this freedom? Why is it limited? So these are the questions that we need to ask. And the answer is that till we have lust, hatred and delusion, then we constantly pollute the mind. And very beautifully mentioned Venerable Sariputta in the Mahavedalla Sutta. So he mentioned ragoko avso pamana karano, doso pamana karano, moho pamana karano. So when your mind associates lust, so that mind is limited. not unlimited. That mind is limited, narrow. When your mind has hatred, that mind is limited, not unlimited. When your mind has delusion, that such mind is limited. It has narrowed down. So the causes of limiting the mind is therefore lust, hatred and delusion. So if you don't have any lust, hatred and delusion, then it is natural to have an unlimited mind, immeasurable mind. Till your mind has lust, hatred and delusion, your mind is having very narrow scope. So you can't completely liberate the mind. Your mind has somewhat restricted, constrained. Now slowly if you are able to remove lust, hatred and delusion, then your mind start to blossom. Your mind start to enhance, expand. And now it becomes limitless, immeasurable. And in other terms, Venerable Sariputta mentioned, lust makes something to be something. So I have to use some different terms here. Now whenever you see particular sight, so we give some value to it, we attract it to it, we attach to it, and we make it something important. Similarly, when we hear some sound, if it is a beautiful sound, we make it something. We call it a song, we call it a melody, we give it various names, and we give it some value, and we actually make something out of that sound. Similarly, when we come across some sort of smell, if it is a fragrance, and say for example, and if it is so pleasant, then we attach to it, attracted to it, and probably when we give it a name, give it a value, and we make it something. Similarly for taste, similarly for the tactile sensations, and similarly for various kinds of mental objects. So they actually come and go, they are basically natural phenomena, but we add value to them, we construct upon them, we fabricate on top of them because of lust, hatred and delusion. So if we don't have lust, hatred and delusion, so we can leave them aside. We don't need to go and attract to them. We don't need to go and attach to them. We don't need to fabricate on them. But we can keep them aside. So therefore, the reasons for this fabrication, reasons for these preparations, constructions, are nothing but lust, hatred and delusion. So if one's mind is completely free from lust, hatred and delusion, then Buddha mentioned, so one's mind is akinchana. Akinchanang anadanang etan deepang anabarang nibbanamiti tam brumi jaramachu paretaya. So Buddha very beautifully mentioned akinchanang anadanang. So the liberated mind basically does not take any phenomena as something, and it does not attract to anything, does not cling to anything. Akinchanang anadanang etang deepang anaparang. So that is the refuge, that is the island, nothing else. Nibbanamiti tam brumi jaramachu paretaya. So I call it as Nibbana, which is giving the freedom of decay and death. So this is a beautiful verse coming in the Sutta Nipata. And so similarly we can understand, so if one is able to slowly uproot lust, hatred and delusion, then the mind becomes unlimited, immeasurable, and it does not take any outside phenomena or any inside phenomena as something, as something important. And further, Venerable Sariputta give a very interesting answer to a question in the Sangiti Sutta, which is available in the Diga Nikaya. So he is questioned by another monk that if one developed this signless concentration properly, is it possible to say that his consciousness further going to associate any kind of a sign or mark? Then Venerable Sariputta say, you can't say so. If you say like that, it's a kind of disparage to the Buddha, kind of a ill fame to the Buddha. Because if one develops signless concentration systematically, gradually, so that actually leads to complete liberation of signs. So he beautifully mentioned there, Attana metang also anavakaso yang animittaya ceto imuttiya bhahavitaya bahuli kataya yani kataya vattu kataya anuttitaya parichitaya susamaradhaya. So basically these are the different ways that one is developing the signless concentration. So he is developing it, he is maximizing it, doing it again and again, repeatedly doing it, and he makes it like a vehicle, one's vehicle, so that one can take it anytime, and one possesses that kind of a skill, and one is properly training oneself, and one can enter that state at any time. So basically that is the level that discussed here, that how much this signless concentration is developed, make it abundant, make it available freely. If one is able to develop such level, then Buddha mentioned that such mind, in other terms such consciousness, cannot associate any sign. So in other terms, that such established consciousness, associated consciousness cannot arise. Nissaranang hetang also sabba nimittanang yadidang animitta ceto vimutti. The complete freedom of signs is called the signless concentration. So we can therefore say, so if one has to uproot lust, hatred and delusion, one can use this signless concentration. So how to use it practically? So that is also an interesting question. Now we have discussed some very sublime benefits of signless concentration. So how one has to develop it. Suppose you are developing Satipatthana meditation and you are practicing, say, Vedananupassana, for example, and you are able to achieve this signless concentration only for 10 minutes. Then you have to enhance it 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So likewise, suppose you are able to maintain it for 45 minutes. In a way, that is enough. Now mind become somewhat familiar with that state. So mind understand now, okay, it can stay in this signless concentration for a while. Now it is become somewhat registered in the mind. Now actually one has to loosen that concentration. Then only various defilements again come to the mind. In other terms, various signs again going to appear in the mind, because you have loosened the concentration. And then you can easily notice them and you can erase them. And again mind becomes signless. Again you are little loosening the concentration. Again certain signs going to appear in the mind. You notice it through mindfulness and then you erase it. Again mind become clean, signless. You are further loosening the concentration. Again certain signs are going to appear. You notice them, again erase them. So likewise you have to expand this signless concentration. So in other terms, in order to develop signless concentration, you have to allow it to break. When you are allowing it to break, you notice the intruding signs. So those penetrating signs you notice because you are very vigilant, quite mindful. And with that mindfulness you are noticing those intruding defilements, intruding attachments, graspings, signs, and you start to eliminate them, you start to erase them. Again mind become clean, signless. So this process has to be repeated again and again, 1,000 times, million times. So then you understand, okay, now the mind can maintain such pure signless state even with less concentration. Previously, you couldn't do it. You have to go through the systematic process of recognizing the impermanent phenomena, impermanent characteristic, and that wisdom has to be grown to some extent. Then only mind become free, signless. But now you can immediately put to the signless concentration. You don't need to go through that systematic practice even, because now mind has recognized this signless concentration. You can immediately put your attention to this signless concentration. You don't need to go through that vipassana part. And as a result of that, now mind dwells in this animitta state. So likewise, now you are slowly uprooting lust, hatred and delusion. And therefore, Buddha mentioned, if one is able to uproot that kind of lust, hatred and delusion completely, then one can say one has established in Sammajnana the proper wisdom. Because now mind is completely free from lust, completely free from hatred, completely free from delusion. So therefore, it is mentioned the Arahant is with 10 factors, not just 8. He is with 10 factors, as I mentioned, as I showed in the diagram. So he has the typical 8 path factors, plus he has 2 more factors, that is right wisdom and right freedom. And at the end of the Brahmana Sutta, there are 4 beautiful verses, and I thought of concluding the session with those 4 verses. So there Buddha mentioned, Yassa saddhacha panyacha dhamma yutta sadha durang hiri isa mano yottang sati arakka sarati. Now he is giving a very beautiful analogy between this beautiful chariot with the Noble Eightfold Path. So there he mentioned, so I am just taking the Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation here, it is qualities of faith and wisdom. Its qualities of faith and wisdom are always yoked evenly together. Shame is its pole, mind its yoke tie. Mindfulness, the watchful charioteer. So the Pali phrase, Sati Arakka Sarati. So mindfulness is the watchful charioteer. Now you can see throughout the practice, you have to have mindfulness, and he is the charioteer. He is the driver, in other terms. So mindfulness is the one showing you where you are heading towards. So what are the areas that you need to improve? What are the areas that you need to little control? So where you are moving ahead. So all this watchful part is done by mindfulness. So therefore, always we have to keep mindfulness in the front, not concentration, but mindfulness. So mindfulness will show you the state of the mind. And again, beautifully Buddha mentioned here, faith and wisdom are to be balanced. And again, the shame is its pole, mind its yoke tie. So shame, hiri ottappa, the moral shame, moral dread also has to be coupled in the practice. And then rato sila parikkaro jhanakko chakka viryo upekha dura samadhi anicca parivaranam. The translation goes like, the chariot's ornament is virtue, its axle jhana, energy its wheels. Equanimity keeps the burden balanced. Desirelessness serves as upholstery. Now, every different spiritual quality is giving its corresponding part to the charioteer. Avyapado avihinsa viveko yassa avudham titikha chamma sangnaho yoga khemaya vattati. Goodwill, harmlessness and seclusion. These are the chariot's weaponry. Forbearance its armor and shield, as it rolls towards security from bondage. Etadattanti sambhutang brahmayanang anuttarang niyanti dhira lokamha anya dattu jayang jayanti. This divine vehicle, unsurpassed, originates from within oneself. The wise depart from the world in it, inevitably winning the victory. So it's a kind of a summarizing of the whole sutta, the Noble Eightfold Path and few other spiritual qualities. Very beautifully given some analogy between this horse chariot, and then Buddha concludes this sutta, the sermon. So with that, actually a couple of verses, I also like to conclude the session, and this basically ends the Brahmana Sutta as well as the discussion on the Noble Eightfold Path. So now I open the session for questions.
Thank you, Dante. That was very beautiful. So if we have any new friends joining us for the very first time, welcome. You may ask your questions by raising your hand, or you can also send them to me via the chat. So I'd like to invite Joseph to please ask the first question.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hello, Bhante.
Hello.
Thank you so much for tonight's lecture. That was really, really great. So I just want to confirm the definition of sign, because I'm not 100% sure to understand what is meant by sign. Is it the same as perception?
Yeah, so interesting question. Actually, perception, I feel little broader. The signs are more primary. Say, for example, when you see something, you immediately recognize that, assume that you see someone. So you have, once you see someone, there are various signs and marks immediately you pick from that sight, and through which you get a recognition. You get, okay, this is my, say, my mother, this is my father, this is my daughter, okay, this is my wife, this is my son. So likewise, you immediate, I mean, if you little sort of explain the process, it happens within a couple of seconds, so not even second, within microseconds it happens. But actually the mind picks certain signs or marks from that sight, and using which you recognize, okay, this is someone. So after you have recognized, then you have some perception. Or assume that he is your son, then you have, okay, my son is a good son and he is a lovable son. So likewise, now you have some emotions and the perceptions attributed to that recognition. So the signs are more primary to the perceptions, but typically the sanya is translated to perceptions, but sanya, the Pali term, also has the connotation of various signs. The signs are the most primordial type of phenomena available at the very early stages, and on top of that we attribute various other components, and then we develop kind of a perception.
So is there a distinction between the sight and the sign?
No, actually the signs are available in sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, and again in the mind. Say for example, if you want to distinguish between two people, then you have distinct signs attributed to those two people. One may be tall, one may be short, one may be fat, one may be lean, one may be fair, one may be black. So likewise different signs are there. That is on the vision side. But on the auditory side, so you have different tones. Say when a woman is talking, you have a different tone. When a man is talking, you have a different tone. Similarly, when a particular singer is singing, you still can recognize through some subtle differences in that sound. So that means even in the auditory side, so there are small signs which distinguish from others. The smell also similar, the taste also similar. So when it is salty, you can recognize. When it is savor, you can recognize. So likewise, even the taste, you have such differences. So therefore, the sanya, Buddha mentioned, are sixfold, pertaining to these 6 faculties. So and on the level of vision, we have various signs. On the level of auditory, we have various signs. The taste, we have various signs. Smells, we have various signs. Tactile sensations, we have various signs. And similarly, in the mind, various mind objects, also they have different tastes. Yeah.
So would that mean that the signless mind, that there would be no sound, there would be no, like we wouldn't be sort of hearing anything? Or would it be possible, for example, that there's still sound, but it's not, because I haven't sort of had any kind of, say, experience where there was no sound.
Yeah, so let me explain. So basically, this doesn't mean that you become dumb or you become deaf or you become blind. Rather, the mind is not interested of making a story out of these signs. So you are not going to proliferation. So you leave them at bay. So that is why Buddha mentioned to Bahya, ditte dittamattam bhavissati, sute sutamattam bhavissati, mute mutamattam bhavissati, viññāte viññātamattam bhavissati. So you keep what is seen as just seen. You keep what is heard as just heard. You keep what is sensed as just sensed. You keep what is cognized as cognized. Don't go on to further thought, further thinking, further elaboration or further fabrication. So the mind, even though mind has the skill to know them, mind is not involved with them.
So there's still the vijnana, there's still the sight, there's still the hearing.
Yes.
But it doesn't go into the recognition of it, or I think I understand.
Yeah, even as far as I can say, even maybe some to some extent the recognition also there, but the mind is not interested of going and giving more value to it. Say you have seen and you stop that seen level, and you are not attributing, okay, this is a very good sight, this is so and so, I have to possess it, it belongs to me, it belongs to someone else, I have to steal it, I have to throw it away. So likewise, so mind start to agitate when you give some emphasis or when you give some value to what you have cognized. But here, mind is not interested of doing that activity. Mind has its own kind of composed, say, calm state. So those sights, sounds, etc., does not make any intruding marks to the mind. It can't stain the mind.
Yeah, I think I understand. It's a difficult thing to put the finger on, but I think I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bhante.
Yeah. So basically, mind is capable of maintaining or safeguarding its purity. Now, typically what happens is, assume that we were able to maintain a pure mind. But once we loosen our concentration, again certain signs come inside the mind, and if we give some emphasis, if we give some value to them, then we start to think about it. That we lose our internal equipoise. We lose our internal silence. And we again, mind start to agitate and mind become somewhat corrupted, somewhat, say, with some inner chatter. So that means the mind has become agitated. But the very moment that mind recognizes it, through mindfulness, we can stop that. We can slowly deconstruct it and remove it and again keep the mind quiet. So this process at the beginning may take some time, But with practice, it becomes more and more, familiar process. It becomes more and more easy process. One become easy to achieve it. So that's why Buddha mentioned in the various suttas, like Indriya Bhavana Sutta, say when you see something, probably you might get happy. The mind become elated. So that elated state has to be recognized, but you should not dwell there. Rather, you have to return back to that signless. You have to return back to that equanimous state, because that's elated state is something conditioned, something fabricated. So likewise, different ways that Buddha has mentioned. So in order to return to that equilibrium.
Thank you very much, Bhante. Appreciate it.
Okay. Everyone's online.
Everyone's online.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite iPhone, sorry I can't pronounce the long name, but you may...
Ravi Karunaratna.
Thank you, Bhante.
iPhone Ravi Karunaratna. Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bhante, now that when raised a question, what is the Pali term for sign?
Sanya. Sanya.
Oh, Sanya.
Yes, yes.
Oh, I see. Also perception then, right?
No, actually that's why, typically Sanya is translated to perception. But that is the typical translation, English translation given. But the Pali term Sanya is even more primordial.
Okay.
Yeah, because Sanya basically has the connotation sign. But the signs leads to generate perceptions.
Right.
Yeah.
But my actual question was, now that he raised that question, I was wondering about the Pali term. Very often in that referring to Nibbana, which is our goal, as followers of the Dhamma, we talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, and these are the other two that we have. And the two different things with samatha, which is called tranquility, and vipassana, insight. I have heard that very often you can go to the fourth, fifth jhana in Abhidhamma, the Theravada tradition, and at that point you can continue on, but that is not taking you to the path of enlightenment, the Nibbana. But you have to go sort of into vipassana, insight, anicca, dukkha, anatma. And I suppose from there only that you get the 9 and the 10, which is wisdom and liberation. This is the understanding I was getting. And they say that if you go into 6th and 7th, you may be in heaven, or you can never even attain Nibbana like Asita.
Yeah.
So whether if that is that understanding correct?
Yeah, you are correct.
Either you said that you can go on the samatha and then continue and also attain liberation.
No.
But then that liberation does it mean enlightenment or?
No, not at all. No, not at all. So the temporary liberations that I have discussed through Appamana Ceto Vimutti and the Akinchanya Ceto Vimutti, that Appamana Ceto Vimutti is called the 4 Brahma Viharas: Metta, Mudita, Karuna, Upekha. Metta is loving kindness, Mudita is altruistic joy, Karuna is compassion, and Upekha is equanimity. So those are very temporary, and if one develops them, the ultimate, ultimate result is to achieve being reborn into the Brahma realm. So as you correctly mentioned, it is not the Nibbana, but if you develop it further and further and maintain that till your death, then as a result of that you can reborn in Brahma realm. So if you refer Mettanisansa Sutta, so Buddha mentioned that as the 11th benefit. But on the other hand, the other two categories. Sunyata Cheto Vimutti and Animitta Cheto Vimutti, you can actually develop and then can achieve the liberation, the proper liberation. But on the other hand, there is another interesting thing that we need to discuss here, that Appamana Cheto Vimutti and Akinchanya Cheto Vimutti. Now, those are the Brahma Viharas, and this Akinchanya is the nothingness. So, they are also, as you mentioned, you can turn to the Vipassana. So, once you are able to establish there, rather than simply dwelling there, you can use that as a foundation to develop Vipassana, to develop insight. So, then actually you can come to the Vipassana. Actually, you are using that as a kind of a base, kind of a foundation, and on top of that you start to build the wisdom, and through which you can achieve liberation, the proper liberation. So therefore it is mentioned beautifully in the Mahavedalla Sutta, Venerable Sariputta mentioned, even though these four categories have their distinct features, if one develops them properly into the Vipassana side, ultimately all those four categories ended up with Arahantship. So that is called Akuppa Cheto Vimutti. Akuppa Cheto Vimutti is the Arahantship. So it is unshakable. So that is only achieved through uprooting three defilements: Raga, Dosa, Moha, hatred, lust, hatred and delusion. So even though we start with samatha concentration, once you achieve to that liberation level, temporary liberation, you can convert it to Vipassana side, and then you can reach the ultimate, that is the Akuppa Cheto Vimutti.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah.
Very good explanation.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Chitta Devi to please ask the next question.
Thank you. So, Bhante, I'm also just going to sort of ask a little bit about what the first two, the previous speakers sort of touched on.
Mm-hmm.
So, for my understanding is that to get to this signless, is you have to be a permanent signless, you have to be an Arahat. Is that right, Bhante?
Yeah, we have to say so, because permanent signless means that it is not that you are some sort of willfully, intentionally maintaining it. Rather, you have uprooted the reason for making signs. So that is why I mentioned...
Yes, which is Lobha Dosha Moha.
Exactly. So that is where, again in the Mahavedalla Sutta, Venerable Sariputta mentioned, Rago ko avuso nimitta karano, doso nimitta karano, moho nimitta karano. So it is because of lust that the mind constructs signs. It is because of lust or hatred, mind constructs signs. It is because of delusion, mind constructs signs. So, if Raga, Dosa, Moha is not available, that means that the mind is not interested of constructing those signs. So, you may have seen something, but that is it.
Yes.
So the mind maintain its calmness, its sublime level, without getting to trouble, without going on to any construction, fabrication. So that is the point highlighted.
And also in the jhanic levels, you get the perception and non-perception. Also that arupa jhana. So isn't that also that state that you're talking about?
No, not at all.
Neither perception nor perception?
No.
Non-perception?
No.
That's a different thing.
That's a different thing. So that is actually another level of a concentration practice, and it is not that proper signless or the sunyata that we are talking here. I mean, but the point is there may be some similarities as well, because
yes.
if you refer certain other suttas, for example Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, so Buddha mentioned So once you go through vipassana practice, so you are able to achieve arupa jhanic level.
Yes.
So I mean, you have actually used proper vipassana practice. That means you are recognizing impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and say selflessness, and all these things through which you are able to achieve, say, signless or emptiness, etc. And once you are able to well establish on such level, you can immediately put your mind onto that level. You don't need to go through, as I mentioned, this systematic practice again and again, because the mind has well established there, mind has well recognized that state. And now it is somewhat similar to the arupa jhana, because arupa jhanas are also unlimited, boundless. This signless and emptiness and those are also are boundless. They also don't have any limit, any narrowing of the mind. So only thing is in the typical arupa jhana, so the mind still associates something. Mind hasn't developed enough wisdom. Mind is conditioned to associate kind of a boundless state. Say, for example, when one is achieving akasananchayatana, so again and again you are conditioning the mind, that telling that space is unconditioned, or space is boundless, space is boundless, space is boundless, space is boundless. It's like a trance actually. So again and again you are conditioning the mind, programming the mind to perceive that boundless nature of the space. So you can see it is not based on the wisdom. It is based on the kind of a conditioning. But on the other hand, when it comes to animitta and sunyata, those are actually going through the deconditioning, deconstructing. There's a huge difference in that sense.
So, yes, I got that, Bhante.
Yeah.
So, would it be right if I say that in deep meditation we do get to these levels of, temporary signless states? Would it be right if I said that?
Correct. Why not? Yes.
But you also mentioned when you were talking, you said it's a clean, clear, pure, and more sublime. You use the word sublime. So that is a sublime state is also a positive feeling. Isn't that right?
Correct. Even though we call them as, sometimes these terms give some negative connotation when we are telling like signless, emptiness, etc. But those are very positive feelings. Those are very rich. Those are very rich feelings.
It's a pleasant feeling.
Exactly.
It's a pleasant feeling.
Correct.
So is that not signless? Then shouldn't it be signless? That's why I was a bit, because in deep meditation we go into states of subdued bliss. Not bliss. The bliss is the early stages, but subdued, very subdued.
Yes.
But it is a pleasant feeling.
Sure.
That's why we want to stay in that.
Yeah, sure. Now even Buddha mentioned etang santang etam panitang. So it is sublime. It is what to say, santang. It is calm.
Yes.
So,
but more than calm, Bhante.
Yeah. So it depends actually. It depends.
Yes.
So sometimes the mind may have a little bit of calmness, equanimity, and sometimes it may have a little bit of say pleasantness. So likewise, these also may vary. But anyway, it is not something kind of a very say dry kind of a state. Sometimes it may even appear like dry. But because there is no pleasure and there is no sight, sounds, smell, taste, etc. But as the mind becomes more and more refined and more sensitive, so that such sensitive mind is capable of recognizing the subtle happiness.
ultimately we develop dispassion, no, for everything. Isn't that right, Bhante? Isn't that what the Buddha said?
No, thing is, dispassion is towards the sight, sounds, smells, tastes, etc.
No, that is towards the hindrances.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
not towards the
hindrances. Yeah, hindrances as well as to those panchakama, those say sight, sounds, smells, tastes, that those external impingements, external phenomena. So to them you have dispassion. So through that dispassion you are no more going to cling because of that dispassion.
Yes.
So mind is free from clinging because of the dispassion.
Right.
Yeah.
That I understood then. Yes.
Yeah.
That's good, wonderful, Bhante. Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah. Thero Sarnai.
Thank you, Thero Sarnai.
Thank you, and I'd like to invite Shalika to ask the last question.
Thank you, Jennifer. Bhante, I just have the question regarding like when someone practicing signless concentration, you mentioned that you start with like someone may be having like 5 minutes, 10 minutes like that, and you mentioned that once someone reaches like 45 minutes, it's a really good time to achieve, and then. You said like then at that point loosen that concentration and just let some defilements or like a sign come appear, and then you said like just once it appears erase it. What do you exactly mean by erase? It's like if someone can purposely do it, or it's like it means you see it appearing and at the same time you see it disappearing.
Yeah, both. Yes. What you are mentioning is correct, because once you are loosening the concentration, so there is a possibility of signs reappear in the mind, because you are willfully or you are effortfully avoiding the picking up of signs. But once you loosen the concentration, because of the internal potentials, lust, hatred and delusion, the asava, influxes, so mind might go and grasp again. So that indicates there are reappearing of signs. So immediately you become mindful about it. Now the purity has lost, certain intruding signs are now somewhat popping up in the mind. So once you notice them, and if you are able to detach from them, so they quickly disappear. So because it is very much like you are noticing a thief. So once you recognize the thief, it can't stay, because he understands the landlord has the recognize me as a thief. Then it will simply run away. So similarly, so the mindfulness is so sharp and so powerful. So once you notice the defilement, or once you notice the sign appearing in the mind, because it is easy to notice also, because when you are maintaining your mind on the signless state, mind is very much like a blank paper, white color blank paper. Even the slightest drop of ink is easily visible, noticeable.
Yeah.
So similarly, so when you are, even though you are loosening the concentration, your clarity of mind is maintained, and you notice something is now appearing, and once you notice it, it may quickly go away. If it is not going away, actually you can apply various vipassana techniques. So as you mentioned, you can recognize how impermanent it is, or how, even if you get on to some kind of liking or disliking, or even to some level of proliferation, you can recognize it. Okay, now mind has become somewhat agitated, mind has become somewhat burdened, I have lost the freedom, I have lost the equanimity. Instead, mind has become elated, mind has become depressed. So those are the levels that Buddha mentioned to understand. So the signless is very much like a baseline of the mind, the zero line of the mind, and this agitation up or down are like the fluctuations. So when a fluctuation happens, so you can notice it. You are not welcoming it, you are not approving it. Rather, you approve that the equanimous state, calm state, And therefore, again, mind returns to that calm state.
Yeah, it's actually the one thing, because of the, when you spend someone really just like a 45 minutes like that, that means you have really sharpened your mindfulness.
Correct.
So basically then at that point, we become like a kind of a gatekeeper, because we know now I'm kind of loosening and my concentration just to see who is now coming in,
Exactly.
So basically you're watching because of that, definitely you see that.
Yes.
At the same time, once someone develop, concentration up to that, then as you mentioned, it may as soon as you notice, sometimes it disappears. Because sometimes I also experience, sometimes being really mindful, when the lust appears, when I'm looking at it, it actually, goes away.
Yeah.
So, in day-to-day life also, I notice, so I think someone, reaches that point definitely. Because when you said erase, that is why I just want to, find out what exactly it means, how can someone just erase? Now
Yes.
Really understood it.
Yeah. Actually, you don't need to buy an eraser. So mindfulness will do it.
I wish eraser could do that. Thank you so much.
And actually, I like to add few words to that Miss Chitra Devi's question, and that term dispassion. Actually, dispassion towards this sight, sounds, smells, states, etc. That is one aspect. And similarly, Buddha mentioned you have to have dispassion towards this newly developed concentrations as well, because this signless concentration is also something. In case sometimes you might get attached. So therefore Buddha mentioned don't attach to that even. So actually if you attach to that, then you are not going to loosen the concentration, because you are holding it. So therefore we have to have some dispassion towards this signless concentration as well. Then only you are able to loosen the concentration and allow it to break in order to recognize various defilements. Yeah.
So what you're saying, Bhante, is not to have upadana, not to cling to any of these
Exactly.
things. You just observe it and then step back.
Exactly. Therefore, in Buddha's teaching, all these are very much like milestones, and we are using for our progress, and nothing is there to hold.
Yes. And the one other thing you said, Bhante, we can come to these stages very quickly. If I understood correctly, that's why I want to just clarify. We can come to the signless very quickly without going through all these processes of the Satipatthana. Is that correct? Have I understood that correctly?
May be able to come, but the point is you can't maintain.
Yes, okay.
Because, assume that one may be sitting one day and may be able to touch signless, but it may be momentary. You can't maintain it. So if you have to maintain it, you have to have proper sources contributing to sustain it. Some amount of momentum is necessary coming through the wisdom for you to maintain it.
So that is mainly through meditation.
Yeah, that's right. Through vipassana practice, you have to supply that power or supply that fuel to maintain the signless state. Because if the mind is fairly deluded, so it is going again and again pick the signs. So if you have to properly maintain for 30 minutes of signless concentration, that indicates fair amount of mature wisdom supporting that process.
Yes, and these are all, they happen systematically. Bhante, we can't, it doesn't just happen. You have to train your mind.
Exactly. Very correct. Yes.
It's a process. It's a process.
Yes.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, okay.
Bhante, do we have time for another question?
Yes. Yeah, we have.
Okay, Anusha, you may unmute.
Yes. Avasarai Swami Hansa.
Yes.
Okay. in a family dispute, it has to be sorted out. If not, it will grow. Now, if I'm in a signless state, should I keep silent? Because Satya, if I treat Satya as my protector, with Satya I will be aware of this effect it has on me, this family dispute, and the people, how they react to it. But this issue may grow. It will not get solved. I will just observe how each and every one will react to it. Well, in a situation like that, how can I organize my thoughts, Bhante?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, basically, this doesn't mean that we become completely inactive. Actually, you can refer various incidents happened during the Buddha's time. Now, there are many instances that the bhikkhus have misbehaved. And at that time, Buddha categorically criticized them. So, Buddha enact various kinds of precepts. Don't do this, don't do that. And he sometimes actually blamed the monks. I'm using the term blame just to explain. So basically, Buddha has categorically sort of criticized those misdeeds. So therefore, this doesn't mean that we are simply become dumb and allow things to happen every time since we are mindful. I mean, we have to decide when to interact and when not to interact. So typically what happens is when there is no mindfulness, we interact impulsively. We become somewhat emotional, we become impulsive, and then we interact. So then actually we can't properly solve the problem. But with mindfulness, you have that third person's perspective. So rather than you being a victim to the incident, you can step back and look at the whole incident with a third person perspective, from an outsider's perspective. Then you have a proper, possibility to get a proper decision, the correct decision. At that time, if your decision tells that, yes, I need to interact, I need to come forward, I need to instruct, I need to intervene, then we are free to do that, and we are not doing it out of fear or out of delusion or anything. Rather, the mindfulness wisdom has shown us, now it is your opportunity, now it is the time for you to interact, now it is the time for you to speak. But on the other hand, if the mindfulness wisdom is telling you still it is not the time, then we have to keep quiet.
Yes, but to look at it in an analytical perspective, Swaminatha,
yeah.
Should we be like, if it is, the situation cannot be signless, we have to have some perception of a sign, no? Okay, this is this. Otherwise, how can we react?
Yeah, I got your point. Now...
Yeah. Right throughout, you cannot be signless. That's what I feel.
No, the point is this. So let's take an example from the Buddha's teaching, or Buddha's his own character, and maybe say Venerable Sariputta's character. Now they being arahants, they sometimes interact. They sometimes go and intervene. Just for example, now there is a conflict between the monks. There was one time this Venerable Devadatta made a schism among the bhikkhus, and he taken 500 bhikkhus, and then he went to another place. And Buddha then interact. Buddha understood, okay, Buddha actually didn't immediately do it. And Buddha, once those monks were taken, so he kept quiet for some time. And several months actually. Then he understood, okay, now those disciples went with Venerable Devadatta are now mature in their wisdom. Then he asked Venerable Sariputta to go and preach them Dhamma. Now Venerable Sariputta is going to the Devadatta's side in order to preach the Dhamma, and Venerable Devadatta misunderstood, thinking that Venerable Sariputta was also coming to join with his group.
and he allowed to preach him. So Venerable Sariputta preached Dhamma, and all the followers understood the reality, and then they returned with Sariputta back to the Buddha. So likewise you see, now Buddha being the Arahant, so he has interacted. So he doesn't have lust, hatred, delusion. But he knew, okay, this is the time I have to intervene. So in order to intervene, therefore we can't say Buddha did not pick the signs. Probably he has picked the signs. But those haven't become impediment to the mind. So those haven't become somewhat made a stain in the mind. So he has analyzed the situation using various signs and perceptions, whatever it is, but those are only for that purpose. After that, again, his mind may be pure. Even during the process also, he may be, I don't know, we have to assume these things, because we are not Buddhas, we are not Arahants. We are basically discussing based on our assumptions to our limited understanding.
Yes.
So when lust, hatred and delusion are no more there, so it may be probably still they can utilize science, they can associate science, but mind is not making any permanent damage because of them. They are not, sometimes it is called sanya nanusenti. Now what happens is, when the typical worldly people are associating science, they make a kind of a lasting damage to the mind. So that is why mentioned as kind of an influxes. They become a habit of the mind. They become somewhat deeply rooted in the mind. But the Buddha and the Arahants may be sort of dealing with the science, but they doing it with some safe distance maybe. Those signs may not do a permanent damage to the mind, and they may not last in the mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's clear, Bhante.
Yeah.
Thirwan Saranai.
Yeah.
Swamin Hansa.
Right, Thirwan Saranai. Okay, I think now we have come to the end of the program. So we have spent 1.5 hours today, and spending listening to Dhamma and discussing the Dhamma. With that, we were able to accumulate some merits, and with some compassion towards everyone, let's share the merits by reciting the traditional verses. Ettavatacha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Ettavatacha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Ettavatacha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampatti siddhya. Akasattha ca bummattha devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkhantu sasanang. Akasattha ca bummattha devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkhantu desanang. Akasattha ca bummattha devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakkhantu mamparang. Idang vo nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang vo nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang vo nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya. Imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya. Imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satang samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.